I first heard it while making my coffee. The morning wasn't going well. I had woken up late, after hitting the snooze button twice. I reached over to where Mark should have been, but the space was cold and empty. I stared at it for a moment, then hit snooze again out of frustration. One downside of working from home was missing out on morning kisses from Mark, especially when he left for work early. But the upside was that I could take a few extra minutes to wallow in self-pity. When the alarm went off again, I finally dragged myself out of bed. I really wanted to crawl back under the covers. The air outside my warm cocoon was chilly, and Mark always waited to turn on the heater. I was also reminded of all the little aches that came with adulthood: back pain, ankle pain, jaw pain from sleeping awkwardly, and the extra discomfort in my joints because of the cold. And of course, I also needed to use the bathroom. Just another typical morning. After a quick stop in the bathroom, I shuffled into the kitchen, feeling like a zombie. Whether I was undead or not, I had bills to pay, so I had to stay alert enough to work. A strong, hot cup of coffee was exactly what I needed. I approached the coffee machine and followed my usual routine, almost on autopilot. I grabbed a mug from the cabinet and placed it under the machine. I opened the lid, and the machine started buzzing. I reached into the cabinet again and grabbed a cheap K-cup. The buzzing grew louder. I inserted the cup into the machine and closed the lid. The sound it made was sharp, almost jarring. I pressed the 8 ounces button on the touchscreen. The buzzing turned into a steady hum. I pressed the button to start the coffee, and the machine began to whir. I could barely hear it over the noise. Then I heard the floor creak behind me. Something was watching me. Something was. I quickly turned around, nearly knocking a jar of sugar off the counter. But there was nothing there. I was alone in my apartment. Mark had already left for work before I woke up. A quick glance at the door confirmed it was locked, even the deadbolt. No one was there, just the sound of the coffee maker and my racing heartbeat. No buzzing, no drone. I took a deep breath and leaned back against the counter with a groan, trying to shake off the adrenaline. I opened the fridge to grab some creamer and poured a generous amount into my coffee. As I stirred it, I reached for the pill container next to the sink. What better way to enjoy a fresh cup of coffee than by using it to swallow a little pill? Not that I needed the coffee anymore. After whatever just happened, I was wide awake. Still, I grabbed the coffee and made my way across the apartment to my office to get to work. It had been over 6 months now, and I still couldn't believe how perfect my job was. I'd managed to land a remote billing position with a telehealth company. Medical billing is notorious for being a nightmare of paperwork, but that was exactly why it suited me so well. Fixing errors, filling in boxes, decoding errors. It was like scratching an itch I didn't know I had. The best part? I barely had to talk to anyone. I could put on music, focus on the paperwork, and not worry about anything beyond my office for hours. When I logged into the practice's HR system, I noticed several claim rejections highlighted in bright red. They all came from the same insurance company and involved the same clinician. My initial thought was that it must be an NPI-related issue. This led me to another puzzle, and before I knew it, I was getting back into the groove of work. I deciphered the error message. I shot an email to the clinician. I opened the next batch of rejections. I ignored the buzzing sound in the background. I turned up my music. I pulled up a patient profile and selected the billable dates of service. The droning noise grew louder, but I pressed on. I checked the payer address and filled out the intimidating red form. My jaw still ached. I submitted the claim, and the noise became deafening. I opened another era, feeling the droning right behind me, pressing against my chest. It felt like it was in my lungs. I struggled to breathe. Then my monitor went black. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen, and something else stared back at me. I pushed myself away from the desk with a gasp, nearly knocking over my chair. I shivered and blinked at the screen, which was still displaying the usual insurance paperwork, awkward tables, and blocks of text. I turned to look at the left side of the screen, at my office window. The glare from the rising sun gave me a clear view of my reflection. Just as normal and familiar as always. It hadn't been real. I was safe. I was alone. Still, I turned around and double-checked that the door to my office was closed before sliding my chair back into place. Just to be sure. Just for my own silly reassurance. The workday went on. I fell back into my routine, forcing myself to stay focused, even when I started hearing that drone again. It wasn't real, after all. It was just a trick, my mind playing games with me because I hadn't had enough sleep. Lunch arrived at noon, as it always did, but the memory of that morning made me pause. I had to step out of my office to retrieve my lunch from the fridge. Why did that make me uneasy? Even if the drone returned while I was in the kitchen, it couldn't harm me. It wasn't real. Still, I avoided the coffee machine, taking the long way around the kitchen island to reach the fridge. I kept berating myself the entire time. Then I noticed I'd left the creamer out. What was wrong with me this morning? Why was today so strange? I shook my head at myself and set the likely spoiled creamer by the sink to deal with later. I'd clean it up after I had some leftover pasta. I opened the fridge and grabbed a plastic container. Lifting the lid, my hands felt icy. I placed the container in the microwave and pressed the 1 button. My hands trembled. The microwave whirred to life, and the container began to spin. But the hum wasn't just from the microwave. I turned around. The drone was in the office. The container continued to spin. The hum grew louder near the door. I felt a surge of danger. The droning resonated deep within me. I was frozen. There was nowhere to escape. The microwave beeped, and I yelped, jumping in place, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I started to shake, wrapping my arms around myself. There was nothing to fear, yet for some inexplicable reason I felt like something was stalking me. But what, exactly? I couldn't articulate it, which only made my fear more maddening and irrational. I was a grown woman. Couldn't I manage a few odd noises throughout my day? For a brief moment, I considered texting Mark. He could stay on the phone with me while he was at work. He'd done it before. If I really needed him to, I was sure he'd come home. But what was I supposed to say? There's a strange noise following me around the apartment, and it's making me feel like I'm going to die. That sounded absurd. If I texted Mark that, he'd definitely come home, but he'd probably bring a cop to take me to a mental hospital. I grabbed my food from the microwave and set it on the counter to cool. I wasn't hungry anymore. I'd just toss it later after work. Missing lunch once wouldn't kill me, right? I felt like I'd been asking myself a lot of questions like that over the past few hours, all while dodging the one question I didn't want to confront. It lingered at the back of my mind as I returned to my office. It let me sit back down at my desk, but slowly it crept up on me, just as the unsettling, familiar sound began to rise again. What was causing that noise? It was nothing. I knew that. The drone drifting up from my doorway again wasn't real, so that meant nothing was causing it. But the nothing was loud, really loud for something that didn't exist. The more I focused on it, the more I started to notice. It was hard to hear anything else over the droning, but if I concentrated, I could almost swear I heard the soft whisper of feet on carpet as it came closer.